Hello and welcome to lecture 50 of the course Theory of Computation. This is going to be a very important lecture in the course because we are going to be showing one of the important results, one of the most important results that we will be learning in the course, right? So, in this lecture we will see Cook-Levin Theorem, which shows that SAT is NP complete. In the previous lecture we defined NP completeness, and then we discussed how is it possible to show that something is NP complete, right? So we have to show that to show that a certain language is NP complete, we have to show that all the languages, let's say if we have to show that B is NP complete, we have to show all the other languages in NP are reducible to it, right? Fortunately, if we have some NP complete language, we let's say if let's say B is known to be an NP complete language, to show that C is NP complete, it is enough to reduce B to C, right? But to begin with, we need to have some already known NP complete language, right? So Cook-Levin theorem provides us with that known NP complete language, and that is satisfiability, right? So we will show that two things we have to show in order to show that SAT is an NP complete. SAT is NP complete. First is that SAT is in NP. Second is that all the languages in NP are going to be reducible to SAT, right? The second step is going to be the hard step. The first step is actually something that in fact we have already said in the course in one of the previous lectures. Anyway, it is brief, I will quickly explain again. The second step is going to be the harder step, right? So in order to show that all the languages in NP are reducible to SAT. So let me just quickly recap how to show that SAT is an NP. Right. So we just have a guess and verify Turing machine, right? So we guess, so let's say SAT has the Boolean formula that is given phi has n variables, let's say x1 to xn, right? So we non-deterministically guess true false values for all of these n variables, right? And then after guessing the n variables, so and then you verify whether this assignment that is guessed does it satisfy the formula phi or not. If the assignment satisfies the formula phi, you accept. If it does not satisfy, we reject. So if there is a satisfying assignment, one of these 2 power n guesses will be the satisfying assignment, and then we will accept. If it is not, if the formula is not satisfiable, right, none of these guesses will lead to a satisfying assignment, right, because the formula is not satisfiable. Hence, all the paths will lead to reject, because whatever you try out, it's not going to work, right? So that is how we show that SAT is an NP. So now let us focus on the second part of the proof to show that all languages in NP are reducible to SAT, right? So the thing is, we saw one reduction in one of the previous lectures, right? We saw 3 SAT reduces to clique, but then we knew that it is a 3 SAT and we have to get a clique instance. But here we have to deal with some abstract language A, and we have to show that A reduces to SAT. The only thing that we know about A is that A is in NP, right? This is the only thing that we know about A, right? And we have to show that this language A reduces to SAT. So if we knew something about the language A, then we can use the structure of the language, or we can use that to build the reduction. But here we have no information about A. The only information that we have is that A is in NP, right? The only information that we have about A is that A is in NP. Now, this is the challenge here. We have to build a reduction from this language A, about which we do not know much about, such that if a string is in A, the reduced instance, the f of w should be in SAT, and if the string is not in A, f of w should not be in SAT. So we have to somehow build a Boolean formula from w so as to get this connection, right? So as to get this relation, right? So that is the challenge of this, and that's why this is an important result, right? So let us try to understand, let's try to see what we have, right? So the only thing that we have is A is an NP. So now what does it mean? Let's try to understand this, right? This is pretty much the only thing that we have, and we have to work with this, right? So what does A in NP mean? A is in NP means that A has a polynomial time non-deterministic Turing machine that decides it, right? Non-deterministic polynomial time decider. So let us say A is decided by a non-deterministic Turing machine n, right? This is just the definition of NP, right? In polynomial time. So to be a bit more specific, let's say it gets decided in time n power k, right? So this means that there is a non-deterministic Turing machine that runs in time n power k and decides. This means that when there is a string that is in A, when a string in A, W is in A is input to the Turing machine, to this Turing machine, then we have a sequence of computations, right? So there could be many computation paths. Let's say W is input to N. There could be many computation paths, but we know at least one of them is an accepting computation path. So we know at least one of them is an accepting. So the others could be reject, but we know at least one accepting path exists, right? So what does it mean? One accepting path means there is a sequence of configurations. So starting with the starting configuration, then another configuration, and then another configuration, and so on. There is a sequence of valid sequence of configurations that lead to an accepting state or accepting configuration, right? So we are just analyzing what it means to say that A is in NP, right? So when there is a string that is in A, there is a sequence of computations that leads N to an accepting computation, right? Meaning starting from the starting configuration through a series of valid successor configuration, finally reaching to accepting configuration, right? And we know that N decides A in n power k time. So the number of steps here is at most n power k, right? So which means this, right, number of steps here is at most n power k. So there is a sequence of computations starting with the starting configuration and reaching to an accept for n on the string W. And when W is not in A, so this is when W is in A. When W is not in A, right, there is no such sequence of computations. Meaning whatever valid sequence of computations or configurations that we see will lead to reject, right? That's what it means, right? So when W is in A, there is a sequence of computations leading to accept, and when W is not in A, all the sequence of computations lead to reject, right? So now let us define a bit more. So this is what we have, and this is what we will work with. Now let us define a bit more about N, right? So let N be the following: Q, sigma, gamma, delta, Q start, Q accept, and Q reject. So this is a standard notation. Q is a set of states, sigma is the input alphabet, gamma is the tape alphabet, delta is a transition function. Starting state, QS is a starting state, QA is the accepting state, and QR is the rejecting state, right? And further we will assume that N is a one tape non-deterministic Turing machine, and let's say it runs in time n power k, where n denotes the length of the input, okay? N denotes the length of the input. Maybe I'll just note that. N denotes length of the input, right? Size of the length of W. And in fact, to be bit more precise, we assume that it runs in n power k minus 3, which is not really big assumption, because if it needs n power k, then we'll go to the next k, we'll go to the next n power k plus 1, so that it runs in n power k plus 1 minus 3, right? Okay. And we define delta to be the set of all input alphabet and states, not input alphabet, all the set of states, tape alphabet, and the delimiter symbol hash, right? So we define delta to be this. Okay, maybe I'll highlight this. So basically, what is delta? Delta is any symbol that shows up in a configuration. So if you remember, configuration had this notation where we have the tape content, and we had inserted the state into the tape content, right? So for instance, the starting configuration is the starting configuration is say W1, W2 up to Wn, and with the starting state, right? And this is denoted by Qs because the head is in the first position, followed by the input, right? And this is the starting configuration, and then just to indicate start and end, we put a delimiter. We use a delimiter hash at the beginning and end, right? So this is the role of the three things that we have in delta. One is the state, one is the tape alphabet, right? State and tape alphabet we need to denote the configuration, and the symbol hash serves as a delimiter. Okay, so now we need to reduce the language A, of which the only thing that we know is that it has an NTM decider n, which runs in n power k. We want to reduce it to SAT. So we will have a gadget, we need to reduce it, and the gadget that is used for the reduction is a computation table, right? It's called a computation table. Sometimes it's called computation tableau, right, depending on which book you refer. Basically, it is just a table listing successive configurations. So I have written down here, this is the computation table. Maybe I'll just write down. For n on W, right? So it's a list of, it's basically each row is a configuration. So to start with, this is the starting configuration, where we have the input tape contains only the input W1 to Wn, each symbol n symbols, and the head is pointing to W1, right? That is why the state is the start state. That's why the start state is written here, followed by a bunch of blanks, right? How many blanks? Okay, we'll come to that in a moment. And then we have a delimiter hash at the beginning and end. And how many blanks? So basically what we do is, in n, we said that it decides in n power k time. So in n power k time, the tape head can move up to the n power kth position, right? So the tape head, the farthest the tape head can move is one step right each step, right? So each step it goes one step right. So that is the farthest the tape head can move. So the maximum that it can cover in the tape is n power k locations. So the rest of the locations we put blanks, right? So so that's what I have indicated at the bottom of the screen. N power k is the width of this table or tableau, right? So the first n locations we put W1 to Wn, and in fact before that we have the hash and the QS, followed by blanks, and the last location is the hash again, right? Now this is the computation table. Now let's say one of the possible moves of the Turing machine of the NTM n was this. Let's say delta. So initially you are at the starting state and you are reading the symbol W1. Now there could be multiple options available, right? There could be Q3 Q3C write, there could be Q8A write, right? There could be multiple options available, right? There could be multiple options available for the, because it's a non-deterministic Turing machine, right? Right? There could be multiple options available. Let us take one option. Let's take the Turing machine opted for this option. It moves to state Q8, it writes A in the location where W1 was, and then it moves one step to the right. So that corresponds to the second configuration written here, right? So it writes Q8, it writes A. So the A is in the first location in place of W1, and then the tape head moves right. That is why the Q8 has, the state Q8 is written in the second location now, because now the tape head after this move is pointing to the second symbol, right? And suppose there is another move based on this, let's say delta, based on the second step. Let's say we have delta Q8 W2. So it is pointing to W2 and in state Q8. Suppose the move was Q3 B and right. There could be multiple moves. Suppose this was the selected move. Then we see the move in the next line, right? So now this W2 is replaced by B, and the state is Q3, and the state moves one step to the right, right? So this is going to be one possible configuration that the Turing machine can get to after two steps, right? So like that we can keep filling up the computation table, and so the point is this, right? Starting from the starting configuration, if there is a way for W to be accepted by the Turing machine N, the non-deterministic Turing machine N, there is a valid sequence of computations which eventually leads it to accept, right? So somewhere here accept should be there, right? Somewhere it should accept, right? How long it may take to accept? So we know that it runs in n power k steps, or n power k minus 3 steps. So the number of rows of this table need not be anything more than that. So we know that the acceptance or rejection will happen in n power k steps. So that many rows is what we have, right? So that is the table. It has n power k rows and roughly n power k rows and n power k columns. And if W is accepted by n, there is a sequence of configurations that starting with the starting configuration, ending with an accepting configuration, where every step is a valid successor, right? And suppose W is not accepted by the non-deterministic Turing machine N, then there is no such valid sequence of computations that lead it to acceptance. And this is what we are going to use in order to build the reduction, right? So this is the computation table. It has n power k rows and n power k columns, and basically what we have is the first row indicates the starting configuration, second row indicates after one step, third row indicates after two steps, and so on, right? Okay, so and if the Turing machine accepts or rejects before n power k steps, then we don't change the configuration, it remains unchanged, right? The configuration, we may assume that we just repeat the configuration. Okay, so that's not really such an important detail. And the formula that we want to create, right? The formula we'll call it phi. It will check whether is there a valid sequence of computations that leads to accepting for the Turing machine N on W. Basically, whatever I just said, if N accepts W, there is a valid sequence of computations, and the formula is asking, is there a valid sequence of computations? The formula will be encoded in such a way that it will have a satisfying assignment if and only if this computation table has a valid sequence of computations starting from the actual starting configuration for N on W, ending with an accept. So the formula will be satisfiable if and only if there is an accepting computation for N on W, right? If there is no accepting computation for N on W, the formula will not have a satisfying assignment, right? So that's very, very important. Maybe I'll just highlight that as well. If there is a path for N to accept W, then formula will have a satisfying assignment. Else it won't have a satisfying assignment, right? So we have told the idea is to somehow encode this computation table and check whether there is a sequence of computations that lead to accept. So the formula will have to check multiple things, right? The formula will have to check that this is a valid sequence of computations. It will have to check, is the first row the valid starting configuration of N on W? Then it has to check, is the second row a valid successor of the first row? And then it has to check, is the third row a valid successor of the second row? And so on and so on. And finally it has to check does the computation sequence lead to accept, right? So these are the things that we need to check, the formula needs to check, and we will encode all of this kind of in separate modules, right? So the formula phi will have actually 4 parts, right? The formula phi will be an AND of 4 things, which we will call phi start, phi move, phi accept, and phi sell. So what does each of these do? Phi start checks whether the starting configuration is a valid starting configuration of n on W. Phi move checks is each row a valid successor of the previous row. So is the second line a valid successor of the first line? Is the third line a valid successor of the second line? Is the fourth line a valid successor of the third line? And so on and so on. So all of this together is checked by phi move. Phi accept checks that does this table denote an accepting computation, right? So this is what we want to check: phi start, phi move, and phi accept. And phi sell is a sort of a technical thing, where basically we have to capture this entire table into Boolean variables. So phi sell is basically to ensure that this Boolean variables correspond to a valid encoding of an actual computation table. So the Boolean variables has to be kind of capturing has to capture this table. Now the Boolean variables, like if it is not set based on some rules, it may not lead to a proper it may not be reflecting a table, right? So phi sell is a Boolean formula that indicates that it is actually a table that has been captured by the formula, right? So it's a bit of a technical thing. However, it's not that difficult to see. So when I write down the formula, we'll see, right? So this is what we build. We build phi that is able to check whether n has an accepting computation on W. Okay, so phi has 4 parts: phi start, phi move, and phi accept and phi sell, and we'll define each of these one by one, right? So we have an n power k by n power k table, right? And we have each table or each table entry can be either a hash or a state or something in the tape alphabet. So basically it can be anything from the set that we defined here, delta, right? So each entry of the table could be an entry from delta, right? So for each table entry we have delta many variables, because each table cell can be we can write any of the possible delta symbols, right? So each cell can have any of the possible delta symbols, and to denote this we have delta sized or delta variables for each cell. So the Boolean variables that we work with are of the form xijl, where the so 3 subscripts I, j and l. So I and j denote the table row and column. So let us say this is let's say this is ith row, and let's say this is jth column, and let's say the symbol is I don't know, let's say D, right? So what this means is that if this is the case, we want xijd to be true. So this denotes that the ith row and the jth column, there is a cell here, right? Sorry, there is a cell here. This ijth cell contains the entry D, right? So now any other thing like ij comma a will be false, because the variable ija denotes that the ijth cell contains the symbol a, which we know is false, right? Because it contains D. So if this is the situation, ijD should be true, and ija or ijb or ij anything else, let's say ij hash, should also be false, right? So this is what xijL denotes. So I and j denote the row and column, L denotes a member of delta, and this Boolean variable, it's a Boolean variable, it only takes true and false, indicates whether the ijth cell contains the entry L. So it will be true if the ijth cell contains the entry L, and false if the ijth cell contains some other entry, not L, right? So we have I and j range up to 1 to n power k, and L takes delta possible values. So we have n power k multiplied by n power k multiplied by delta possible Boolean variables, right? That many variables is what we have, right? So once that's what we have. So now the first thing that we will define is phi cell, right, which is a sort of technical thing that I mentioned. This indicates whether the table is properly encoded, meaning we have a bunch of variables, right, xij, xij d, xij a, xij hash, etc. Do these encodings denote a proper table, right? Proper meaning something that is valid. So the thing is this, suppose just for the sake of assumption, assume that xij b was also true, right? So we know that xij d is true, and we say that, let's say, xij b is also true. Now this means that the cell ij contains both d and b. This cannot happen, right? This is kind of an absurd thing. So this is something we don't want to have. We want each cell to contain only one symbol, right? We cannot have two symbols in a cell. And second is that, what if all the delta things where xij something, every one of them is false, which means this cell is empty? That also is something we do not want, because if it is empty, the xij blank should be true, right? So that is why the blank symbol is there. So it cannot be the case that xij everything is false. We need at least one symbol to be there in that spot, and we don't want more than one symbol to be true, right? So this is something we do not want. This is something we do not want, right? And this is what basically phi cell checks. So first let us focus on the part inside, right? So what is this? So think about, so now the outside loop is something where we fix I and j. So let's look at the part inside. So this part says that it's an OR across all xij L. So assume that I and j are fixed over all the L. So now if we want this particular thing to be true, we want this to be true as well, right? So which means that the cell ij, for the cell ij, at least one L should be there. At least one symbol should be there. So which means at least one of these xijL should be true, right? It cannot be that all xijL is false, because it has to contain something. Second is that, this part is that it cannot be that two symbols are there in the same spot. So xijL and ijL prime both cannot be true, right? So we want at most one of them to be true, and that is what is checked by this. If both of them are true, this becomes false. So this formula xijL complement or xijL L prime complement checks that at most one of them is there in the cell ij, right? This is what this encodes, and this we want to be verified for all pairs L and L prime, where L is not the same as L prime. So this part indicates that the ijth cell contains some entry, at least some entry. This indicates that ijth cell does not contain more than one entry, right? So basically this is what I mean by, are the variables properly encoding an actual table? So I'm not even bothered what the table contains. The table can contain garbage, but is it capturing one entry per each cell of the table? That is what the formula phi cell indicates. And outside we have an AND over all possible I and j. So for each cell we want it to contain at least one entry, but no more than one entry. That is what this formula is checking. So it ensures that each cell ij contains exactly one symbol. That's what phi cell indicates. Next is phi start, which is not that difficult. Phi start has to check whether the starting configuration is a valid starting configuration of n on W. So basically all it has to do is check whether the first symbol is hash, second symbol is the starting state, third symbol is W1, fourth symbol is W2, and so on, and then is there a bunch of blanks, and finally hash. And we can just write a formula directly for this. So is the first row and first column contain hash, first row and second column contain Q start, first row and third column contains W1, fourth column contains W2, right? So first row and n plus 2th column contains Wn, n plus 3th column contains blank, and so on till the last penultimate column contains blank, and the last column contains hash, right? So basically we are directly writing down for each column entry this thing. So if phi start is true when only when the first row is exactly what is written here. Only when the first row is exactly what is written here. The first symbol has to be hash, second has to be Q start, third has to be W1, and so on. This is what phi start is encoding, right? It's just directly encoding the first row of the first legal starting configuration of n on W. Now before going to phi move, because phi move is going to be the most involved thing in this proof, we'll have a look at phi accept. So phi accept indicates that this computation leads to accept, right? So we need some accepting state somewhere in this table. It could be anywhere, right? So all we do is we check all the cells. Is there accepting state somewhere? So in all the cells I comma j, we check is there an accepting state somewhere, right? And that's what we do here. Phi accept is we have an OR over all the possible I and j, and we are checking is any of them Q accept. So is Q accept anywhere in the computation? If it is there, that's it. So we just need any of this anywhere in this table somewhere to have Q accept, and that will ensure that phi accept is true, right? So phi cell will be true if the variables encode the table in a proper manner. Each cell contains exactly one symbol. Phi start will be true if the starting row of the table is the correct starting configuration of n on W, and phi accept will be true if there is a Q accept somewhere in the table, right? So this is how phi start, phi accept, and phi cell are defined, right? And the next thing that is to be shown is phi move. So here phi move has to capture that each row is a valid successor of the previous row. So second row is a valid successor of first row, third row is a valid successor of second row, and so on. And this will be slightly more involved, and since this is kind of a lengthy proof, I thought we will break at this point and resume the rest of the proof in the next lecture, right? So just to summarize what we saw here, to show that SAT is NP complete, we first showed that SAT is an NP. Then we wanted to reduce an arbitrary NP language A to SAT. For that we formed this computation table, and the goal is that if A is accept, or if a string W is accepted by the NTM decider for A, there is a valid sequence of computations that lead for it to be accepted, and those valid sequence of computations will make the formula have a satisfying assignment, right? So whatever formula we are building, if there is no valid sequence of computations that lead to accept, the formula will not have a satisfying assignment. So that is the thought process, and we said that the formula will have 4 parts that capture whether the machine starts correctly, moves correctly, ends correctly, and whether it is encoded properly. We saw 3 of them. We saw the starting, ending, and the encoding part. But the part that checks whether each move is a proper move, we will see in the next lecture. So And that's all from me in lecture number 50. But to see the rest of the proof of Cook-Levin theorem, please watch lecture number 51. Thank you.